So welcome to Nabisco. We're in Chelsea Market. This used to be the Nabisco plants. So after this we'll be going up the Highline, but Chelsea has changed drastically. This was the meat packing district. This was where factories would, people would process cattle, so like slaughterhouses, getting the meat ready and then bringing it out by train. And this Nabisco factory, of course, is where the Oreo was invented. In fact, the very table where you just sat is probably where someone dreamed up Oreo cookies. Right now, not really that table, but yes, Oreos were invented here in this building. When we think about reuse of a space, you know, almost 70% of development in America, and I'll have to check the stat worldwide, it's probably not far off, but 70% of development in the United States is renovations and retrofits of existing spaces. The buildings around us, most of them are going to be reused rather than torn down and built up again. So it becomes very interesting when we think about the history of that space. How do you utilize what was there? How do you engage with the history and kind of mix it with what you're using now? So think about this as a factory and then how it's been turned into a marketplace. What are some of the words you would use to describe Chelsea Market? Industrial. What else? Dynamic. What else?
Like low profile. Kind of immersive.
Immersive. Good. So I find it kind of quirky too. That like there are all these different elements. It's not one consistent building layout. They've taken all the rooms that were used for processing, baking, refining the flour, and everything has become their own little shops, their own little, artisanal distilleries and honey makers and etc. So as we walk around, try to imagine what this looked like as a factory prior to it transforming. We'll spend a little bit of time in here before we move out to the Highline because I want to make sure we get a chance to walk on that Highline. A little bit of a schedule for today too. We have 7:15 reservations for dinner, for small plates and drinks. So we're gonna move through all this, and by 7:15 your feet will get a rest. It's gonna be crazy. All right, let's do this.
And after rest, we have any class?
Nope, that'll be the end of that'll be the end of that. If you want, during drinks, we can have Rinkinson present to us all of his projects.
We're gonna do it all again.
All right, but let's walk around and notice the things that they've left. I'll point out as they go. You'll see a lot of original stonework. Certainly, the original flooring is still here in many spaces, but refinished. Right? They've sanded it down. They've repainted it, but they've left the original boards, and you have a sense of We'll keep moving as we go. Some of the HVAC here is new, but when we get away from the food court, you'll see a lot of original stuff. Right, like the framework around the elevators. Some of the piping here. All of these are things where they decided, let's leave these elements, not clean them up, whether or not they're used. It gives you a sense of the factory as it was. Then, of course, there's modifications, right? This is not original, obviously, but they made a choice. They said, from an interior design point of view, let's take some of the ironwork we see around here, the factory details, and apply that to our space, entering in and out. The lighting here is particularly interesting in that it's all fluorescent tubes, very low budget, and kind of factory-like, right? These are shadowy corridors. I think it's meant to also make it mysterious, make it a little bit, what's a good word for it? It's hard to see where you're going. Dizzying or confusing a little bit. And then they have pops of technology. Like over here we have some of the original coils from one of the machines that would knead the dough for, I think that was their biscuit maker. So they'll take some of the technology that exists at the factory, add them in as features. Right, 2 lanes, everybody, 2 lanes. So this is the private well water for drought emergencies. See if there's more history on this. But leaving elements like this that existed in the original factory in place to draw your eye. When we compare, like we look at details like this that were from the original factory, left in here and illuminated to kind of pick up. So they're lighting this from the sides, trying to pick out the water as it falls. Those become the dynamic elements that you notice. I'm losing my voice. All right. Other things I want to call your attention to. When we visited Rockefeller Center, when we visited the Oculus, there was a very clean distinction between what was the Oculus and what was the retail store inside, right? Compare that with the use here. Some have very clean distinctions, where here's the wall and that's the inside, but then others have much more broad. We have suspended lamps extending into the space from this espresso bar. We have others that project into the space with canopies as if it's exterior. So I think they took the disruption that this factory had in terms of the processes and chose to make each space relatively different. For me, it makes it a very engaging space. It feels like there's little clusters and islands of activity rather than being a predictable, comparing this with the Oculus where it is a logical, beautiful, mathematical shape and you can understand where you are in relation to that shape. You can get very lost in here and it's very, you keep finding new things around each corner. So a very different approach to keeping that bit of history, keeping the kind of the roughness of the walls in an effort to enrich the overall experience. Believe it or not, we're going to start walking back out of it to get to the Highline to stay on schedule. So since you all ate in the food court, you've already experienced the best parts of Chelsea Market. We'll keep going this way. And notice the change in sound once you get above the street too.
Move, it looks weird. You just move. What did I say? I thought you moved with it. It worked great.
Still rolling?
Look how beautiful you look.
Great.
You look great.
Okay. We have everybody. Yep, okay, cool. Welcome everybody to Death Avenue. So, I know, right? It used to be Death Avenue. Let me make my monitor bright. Actually, we'll walk a little bit, and when we're in the shade, I'll show you some of the presentation to give you some context. But as we walk, note, first off, you see that pole with the light fixture over the stairs? That's one of only maybe 4 pole-lighted fixtures we're going to see on the Highline. Keep that in mind. I know it's bright right now. We're not seeing the lighting yet. As we get further on, it may turn on in time, but we may not see the effect of the light. But we're going to show you the light. We're going to use daylight so that you can actually see where the light fixtures are. And we're going to talk about the intentions But first, let's walk through and get a sense of the architectural language of it. So we've got these original tracks, which we'll talk about, that now we can walk on in these areas. We'll go this way and you'll see there's benches and lounge chairs that are on the tracks that you can move. And then I'll talk more about the history.
This is what I miss in New York.
Yes.
Walking this is what I miss in Chicago.
Ah, yeah.
They don't have you have walking culture in Chicago. They have a little bit.
That's true. A little bit in downtown,
Yeah.
maybe, but not a lot. Not everywhere. That's
Yeah.
true. There aren't big bike paths and stuff.
Even though we live in downtown, but
Yeah.
I don't feel like we are in downtown.
Yes, I agree. I hope Chicago. I mean, the waterfront, like the architectural tours in Chicago, are so beautiful.
Yeah.
But you need a boat. Like I wish there were more walking paths along that route. Would be great.
Yeah. There's a walking path we have by the river lake.
Yeah.
Lakeview area, and also the river walk.
Yeah. All right.
I have been seeing lots of roadway lights. The Highline are changing to purple or blue. You know what might be the reason?
Roadway lights are doing it, or
Yeah, roadway lights, road lights.
Ah, that's odd. Blue, yeah. Oh, car lamps we can talk about.
No,
But you're talking street lights?
Yeah, street
Huh.
lamps. They are changing.
In New York, that's unusual.
Yeah, in Chicago, I have seen so many places where it's
Ah. So I know.
Blue,
So we're talking about street lighting and how sometimes you'll see purple or blue. So New York had a series of street light adoptions. I was part of I put together a panel back in 2012 about our city, our street lights, where we were talking with the Department of Transportation about how street lights are upgraded over time, what we wanted for color. We had citizens and we had landlords and we had lighting designers talking. And what the city ended up doing is everywhere but Brooklyn is 3,000 Kelvin, warm white. Brooklyn was the first borough to get the upgrades to street light, and that still has 4,000 K. So most of New York is warm white now. Where you do tend to see purpley blue lights, there are other cities. Detroit is one of the more notorious ones for this. Not that Detroit is notorious, but the company that sold the streetlights to Detroit, many of those were getting overheated, colors were separating, and instead of it giving the 4,000 or 5,000 Kelvin white that they had specified, they were shifting towards a much bluer purple. So, yeah, the phosphor degradation because of heat. Not heat while the light was operating, heat during the day. Direct sunlight, maybe a white car or a van parked underneath it that's going to bounce that heat back up. Las Vegas is in the process of going through a really, really stringent review of street lighting because of how hot it gets and how dusty it gets. That's like a 5-year review where they've installed a bunch of street lights to try to test what's going to work. Anyway, tangent from what the Highline is, which gets us almost above all street lights. This is the Highline. So in the 1800s through 10s, 10th Avenue was Death Avenue. It was called Death Avenue because trains would bring in cattle, would bring in supplies at street level. They would hire honest-to-goodness cowboys to ride in front of the train and get drunk people off the tracks. And there were a lot of fatalities. So in 1933, they elevated the train above 10th Avenue. They said, let's raise the train tracks, and this became the original Highline. Trains ran there from the 30s until, I want to say, late 50s. So this is Nabisco. We were walking in Chelsea Market, aka Nabisco Factory. We're underneath Nabisco's loading and unloading station now. So what happened? 1960s, rail gave way to trucks, right? It became cheaper to transport something by a cube truck. or a tractor trailer truck than to bring it by train into Manhattan. And honestly, that's consistent around the country. When you think about why there isn't more high-speed rail, trucks are more efficient generally than rail at delivering goods to specific locations. People, not so much. High-speed rail would still be a very sustainable solution for people to travel. And so you hear municipalities talking about high-speed rail, it's usually passenger trains. But trucks have largely replaced freight trains, depending on the industry and where like for fine goods, finished goods. So the High Line fell into disrepair, right? There were no trains coming. By 1960s, it had become an overgrown kind of natural park. And then the High Line design was a collaboration between James Corner Field Operations, Diller Sgraffito and Renfro, and Piero Duf. They actually had a citywide competition, more than citywide, international competition of different landscape architects and architects putting together proposals for the High Line. I'll talk about that in a second. There are a couple. This is the proposal that was ultimately chosen. This was the team that got picked. Some other proposed ideas were having a giant roller coaster that ran the whole way, having a pool, having 2 swimming lanes that ran all the way up across, a large, long playground. So there were all these ideas for how to use the railway. Ultimately, this idea of the High Line Park is what won out. And I think some of it was honoring. What we'll notice as we walk through here is, a lot of this is honoring what existed naturally over the growth from the 1930s, 50s, 60s when there were no trains traveling here. So you're going to see a lot of natural flora that grew on the tracks, in addition to cultivated rows and choices. The lighting design firm, which we'll see both here and at Hudson Yards, is L'Observatoire International. They work closely with it. It'll get interesting, especially as we get to Hudson Yards, to see what is consistent with the lighting design approach between this long parkway and then this plaza and the buildings that they've made, because there's some clear through lines that they chose as a lighting designer. What's interesting in Hudson Yards is L'Observatoire worked with a huge variety of architects on the different buildings. Maybe I'll save that till after. We'll keep walking down the High Line first. So this area, notice we have blue tube lights up above, right? Kind of an interesting choice. At night, this becomes they didn't want it to just feel like it was a white industrial space under here. So they felt the blue takes you out of the city feeling a little bit. It's a little bit hyper real. You'll notice there are different blue colors of tubes. That is not intentional. Manufacturer produced a second version of these tubes, or rather, no, that's not what happened. The manufacturer that originally made the tubes for L'Observatoire went bankrupt. They got another manufacturer to match the specs, but the blues were not the same. So you'll see a mix of the deeper blues are what was intended, and then you have more of a cyan blue populated by the new products. So L'Observatoire is in the process of trying to get dedicated blue tubes. Why not just get color changing individual chips and dial in the exact color you want? Because it's L'Observatoire. The L'Observatoire, when they want something specific, they say, no, this is about concept as much as execution. I want this blue to be this blue. I don't want the possibility of somebody tuning in red or yellow. It is meant to be this. You know, that kind of decisive choice making has been, I think, a hallmark of L'Observatoire and Herve's work. And there is a mixture of white. The white tubes are intentional. So at night it's just the blue tubes. During the day, to raise the light levels, it's blue and white in here.
Also at night it's just blue?
At night it's just blue. The white tubes turn off at night.
What is the reason to pick the color blue?
They thought that it didn't have a specific meaning attached to it. So if they picked red, or if they picked something that was related to Nabisco, it might have an indication. They thought the blue light was different enough from the rest of the Highline to stand out and be memorable, but didn't have baggage in terms of people's associations with it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're headed up there. Here, let's check. Oh. So while it's relatively wide over here, this is what, come on over here. This is one of the key lighting details all over the Highline. So L'Observatoire, one of their goals was to light across the Highline to get light to the middle of the path, because this is a collaboration between a private organization and New York City Parks. New York City Parks had specific foot candle requirements in the middle of the pathway that they had to meet for safety standards, which are pretty high, to be honest. But they didn't want to have poles in the middle. They wanted it uninterrupted. So we have grazing oh, they're on now. You can see them. They've got grazing application lights that shoot straight across, and this architectural shroud both helps bounce some of the light down, because this is a 10-degree grazer. Most of the light's going out, but this helps bounce the light down in a soft manner so you don't get a lot of shadow here. And it gives full cutoff, so unless you get down to look at it, you're not seeing the light fixture. The other thing that was key at the time, this helps with the heat sinking for the light fixture. So heat management to get the high output to shoot across is handled by this aluminum housing. As we go, you'll see this on both sides throughout the Highline, and it provides sufficient light for us to travel. I'm glad, yeah, some of the other lights are coming on too. Maybe by the end we'll be able to see the difference of what this does. Yeah, if you haven't gotten a chance, you can take a peek underneath. This is LED circa 2004. No, 2008. The Highline has continued to expand over time too. So this is the first section. And every few years they open up more and more sections, although they've largely finished the project now. They've kind of come to the terminal of it. We'll go around this way, sorry. Other lighting language, these are not these. So you'll also see a mixture of landscape lighting.
Yeah.
Typically landscape lighting, you're focusing on the dominant, like the large trees or other elements or features. And here's something that you'll see go away later. These are vertical bollards that L'Observatoire was not very happy when they came out.
Because we see light.
Because you see the lights, right? From a few feet away, you can actually see the glare from these. They don't have great cutoff. Later on, in the later version, you'll see a different iteration of these bollards that L'Observatoire adjusted. But their whole goal was to conceal the LED and let the plants be the illumination. The other thing that becomes very great at night is the illumination's coming from the other side, so you see a lot of shadow play throughout the Highline. It's one of my favorite parts about how they've illuminated it.
So it's a custom-made fixture?
That's a custom-made fixture, yes.
So they place like LED laser inside.
Yeah, it's like a laser. It's like a 10-degree grazer, and then
it looks like the same as that you in that rail.
Oh, you're saying in these the sorry, I was talking only about the rail. So these were a custom bollard developed with, I think BK Lighting helped them with it. Yeah, I don't think it may be the same LEDs, but it may not be. That I'm not sure. It does look, because they're those pairs of LEDs. You might be right.
But you need to be careful.
So we have a change here into the a plaza area. I should have surveyed how many people have been on the Highline. I'm betting probably half. Have you guys done the Highline before? Yeah, I bet about half of the group has. So this section, maybe we'll move over here. Yeah. This section adds to our lighting language, as well as this is an amphitheater where there are talks given, occasional musical performances, and you'll notice they've integrated lights, grazing lights along here. They're also integrated on this ramp that goes down and the steps. A little architectural detail, a lot of people would walk out along that ledge, and so they had to add that handrail and bar to try to discourage people from doing it. This is echoed throughout the rest of the installation by these benches, the ones that pop up out. They feel like they're raised up from the deck with the lights underneath. And that bench is very special because that is where I got engaged. But we'll keep going. I always have to point that out. Yeah, whatever. We've grown with the Highline. It's sweet. We've hidden some stuff underneath there. Silly. Okay.
Remember that forever. Yeah.
One of the things that drives me nuts as well as l'Observatoire is how long scaffolding remains in New York City. So the Highline was designed to be above the street and give you these great views of New York with above the traffic, right? Where a new perspective on the city. This scaffold has been here for 7 years as they're building these buildings. So I had a long discussion with the, oftentimes one of the heads of Friends of the Highline walks with us and gives us a little political feedback on what's going on in their world. The last 2 years of his life have been dedicated to changing the scaffold standards. These are New York City Parks Department standard scaffolds, and he wants to change them to something designed that feels more integrated with the Highline. Or at a minimum, make them 3,000K lights instead of 5,000K lights, because it looks terrible at night. We'll keep moving through. You can imagine this side of the city is what it looked like when the Highline opened in, I think, 2004. And then this side is all the developments that happened or what it's going to look like in the future. It's going from being like giving us lots of views into the city to really views into people's bedrooms and dens in the new buildings. But it has been probably the single biggest influence on resuscitating Chelsea's urban life. When we think about city skylines, when we think about branding a neighborhood, the Highline drove a lot of business here, drove a lot of people wanting to live here. It's an area where we've had art galleries and fashion for quite a while because it was an affordable neighborhood to have an art gallery. Now it is a very trendy neighborhood. Not much to see in here except scaffolding.
Not even the new scaffolding.
Yeah.
Scaffolding is part of New York.
I mean, I guess that is true. Scaffolding is part of New York, but like, couldn't they just do a mesh or something, or
So like,
I
what is
don't
the
know.
reason for this scaffolding?
Because they're building there, this scaffolding is protecting people from falling objects.
Oh, okay.
It's too close to the buildings to not be protected.
Yes. There was like
So beyond the you can see little peek-throughs of the Empire State Building and other buildings too. As it gets darker, that idea of what is the skyline of New York and what is our understanding of the skyline, getting above street level helps us to envision this a little bit. It gives you a removal. For me, I'm always discovering the tower tops and tops of buildings a little more than I would at street level, when I have to worry about getting hit by a cab. Yes, these like barrel vault windows, or yeah, we are seeing some very strong choices made in terms of architecture here in Hudson Yards. We'll pass the Zaha Hadid building, which is beautiful. We've got these kind of, I do like that on both sides we're kind of bookended by these barrel vault buildings. Actually, that could be, yeah.
New York of the future will look like, this is like a future, right? Like a Jetsons.
It could be the Jetsons version of New York, that's true. And I do get amused by seeing how many of them cover up their windows or not.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. That you can see into some of the apartments and the structures, and then others, nope. What's that? Oh, how's the computer up there? I think it's a secondary loft space, probably. Yeah. They appear like super double high spaces. And part of what makes this an effective landscape lighting design is that they're only using a couple pieces in the language, right? We still have those rails on the side. We have the under bench lights, and all of it is meant to be below eye level so that you can engage with the city lighting without seeing the sources from the Highline. That was very important for everyone in the design team. Even the wall sconces, which this is the first off, this is the only building you can enter directly from the Highline, with the exception of elevators. That's because this is the office of the Highline. This is their offices, basically. Otherwise, it's not legal for any businesses to connect directly to the Highline. A lot of them were campaigning, and you could see a lot of them built their terraces lined up with the Highline, hoping that rule might change and they can connect later. That would add a lot of value if you could walk right onto the Highline from your building. But really, the Parks Department and the Highline people said, nope, these rails can't be cut. They're landmarked, so you can't.
This is like used to be before. This railing, these are.
Yeah, these are original railings.
Okay. From the train, right?
Yeah, from the train. The other thing I'll mention is power and control. As we're looking, if you keep an eye out, there are small boxes spread out along the walls. Those are the drivers for all of this. So this is remote driver technology. Over there is a larger driver assembly along the wall and emergency battery backups. They also, periodically, you'll see a little daylight sensor mounted on top, usually by the entrances, and that'll turn off the lights when there's sufficient light available. So because of when it was built, they have to comply with the exterior controls for parks. We'll keep going. It's too loud to talk here.
So Professor, what was the reason for the remote driver? They could hide the driver inside that. So what was the reason might be?
That's a great question. Any ideas? Why would they choose a remote driver when they could fit the driver underneath each of these?
Easy maintenance, I guess. More
You answered your own question. So they gather about 12 or 14 drivers in one panel. So if one part of the Highline fails, they don't have to crawl through this to figure out which driver is bad. They go to the easy access panels and figure out, they can diagnose it there. So it's exactly that. It's about access and maintenance. Good. And throughout, we'll see a mixture of them, exposing the original rails. A lot of this is the native trees. Further on, we get some trees they brought in, but the intention, especially at the beginning, was let's cultivate what's there rather than planting fresh. In fact, up ahead, they had a meadow where people could kind of lounge and play. They decided to take out the grass there and let it grow wild because it was against their original intention. The parking here is pretty interesting, right? You'll also see a lot of art along the Highline. So there's both artwork. You'll see artwork on the buildings intended for us to see, like that's probably not even artwork. That's a billboard. And then you'll see actual artwork curated by the Highline. Much of it having lighting.
Like graffiti and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. There's graffiti. There's a variety of solutions. There's been a bit of a battle between the New York City, the NYPD, and the Parks Department, specifically on the Highline. As you walk by, sometimes you'll see streetlights either bent down, like over there, or further on you'll see a streetlight bent up to cover more of the Highline with light. For generally where there's been like a crime has been logged, they'll adjust that because the Highline doesn't have control over those, but they'll still periodically go and knock them down. It's kind of funny. Their goal is really to preserve the low levels of lighting. Yeah, here's one of those transformer vaults over here. See this big box on the left? This is where they've got lots and lots of, not just the not just the drivers, but that's where they're going to put the emergency battery backups too.
And the power supplies.
The power supplies. The drivers are all contained in boxes like those. Makes it much easier to maintain.
But the
No, the driver is probably the power supply. So
Okay.
most of a driver typically is going to take line voltage in, 120 or probably 277 in this case, alternating current, AC, and that's going to reduce it down to 24 volt or 48 volt DC, sometimes 12 volt DC.
Okay. I guess I've used copper. Well, no, I think
There are some, typically a driver for LED will take AC and go to DC. You might have, if you work with electronics or do soldering of like cold cathode kits or building your own stuff, you might have had a power supply that delivers a certain hertz of AC power and then a second driver that would turn it to DC.
that's usually, when I've set up boxes.
Yeah.
I've done that.
That's changed, driver technology over the last 10 years has changed enough that becomes less frequent.
Right.
It still does show up from time to time, but not as much. So as we see higher and higher, taller trees, you'll notice that there are more of those bullet lights tucked in amongst them. That in order to get enough light projecting up, they're gonna try to hide these landscape lights. Now these are fairly large landscape lights. They could be much smaller with the same output these days, but this speaks to the time that the project was specified and how long it takes to come to fruition.
I read that there were there was a plan to project the Highline and continue all the way to Columbus Circle. Is that true? Or?
There was discussions about doing that, and they keep doing it in iterative steps.
Okay.
So right now it's wraps all the way to the Javits Center,
Okay.
and then there is the possibility to continue. There's public land. I mentioned Robert Moses in our classroom earlier.
Yeah.
Robert Moses is largely responsible for capturing all the land along the Hudson River as city-owned land. So it's difficult to develop. But this is a park, so conceivably the Highline could extend along there if we wanted to. But yeah. Oh, and here's one of the examples of the tipped-up street light, courtesy of NYPD. So this puts all the light up onto the Highline. It helps illuminate the grass because this is the area where vagrants would sleep, and that's I would push it down. I think it's terrible, but there you go. Yep, this is one of the other few. This is number 2 pole light. So the pole-mounted fixtures are there mostly to provide light down the stairways. They have to go 2 floors down, 2 levels down. So that was their solution. This is what a lot of the original buildings by the Highline looked like. Most of them were 1 or 2 story, 2 or 3 stories really in this area. A lot of it's changed and been rebuilt, but this was a lot of what was there in the early, mid 2000s before development took over. And now we have red birch trees and all this pretty stuff here. There's always one group of 20-somethings here that reminds me of friends. I want to go in and have dinner with them. They're always laughing and having a nice dinner.
Here in the Sarah?
In one of the actually I think it's coming up, yeah.
But I was telling Mara, I don't know, at least I would feel uncomfortable living and everyone passing by along all day,
Yes.
looking in.
My wife and I had a long discussion about that with the front curtain. We don't have curtains in the front of our house, and they're building across from us. And so there's not any water here. I'm working on something for Light Fair, a booth design that I needed to photograph that because normally there's water. It's been pretty dry. Normally there's water dripping in. It makes a very noticeable sound when it's hitting. It reverberates. I needed that image, but you can't find it online for some reason. It's not in their archives. But that's part of their permanent collection. I don't know, whatever. Should they have refinished the top of the shrouds to be the same color as the posts, the supports? I don't know.
Aluminum,
Right? It's clean aluminum. What would you guys have done? Would you have painted the top of these to match that, or does it work as reflecting the sky or picking up boundary colors. What would you have done as a choice? Yeah, it certainly doesn't bother me, and it becomes two very noticeable lines going forward while the black might recede. I could see arguments both ways.
And I guess like they are trying to separate like what is original and what is like done after.
That's true too, yeah. There is a very clear distinction of this was added. Good point.
Oh yeah, that's my apartment.
Oh, the bricked up windows. Fabulous. So we're now starting on the third section of the Highline. So these are steel and elevated off. They're actually, there are downlights below here that highlight the turf underneath so that you start to get a sense of lift. There's another new light fixture that we'll find coming up. See if you can spot it. It's pretty tricky. Let's see. There's another light fixture coming up. Let's see, where is one? Yeah, here we go. Let's look over here. There might be one too. Yeah.
Oh, like it's like the bollards, but integrated in the handrail. That's
Yes. So, as the night gets deeper, you remember those bollards they didn't like? This is 2.0. These are, you can see them as we walk too. These are louvered handrails integrated in here so they don't stick out from the structure. And this is a deep enough louver that you don't see it at night. Much more visually comfortable. These provide walking light on this, and then there are additional, you can actually see under here, there's additional lighting pointing down to illuminate the ground below. So this is elevating us up from the original train tracks so that we can see it from a higher vantage, kind of change your perception on the Highline. If we look along this side, let's walk here, you can get a sense of what the underside looks like and how they tackle the lighting. If my glasses were not so foggy. So there's these lines of light and the connections going through, these two parallel lines. Yeah, the conduit that you see here, and then there are mounting blocks and drivers. Let's see. No, you're right, that's the water conduit. Where's the light?
There's these uplights for trees.
There's the uplights for trees. There are downlights too. We'll see if we can spot them further down. Because yeah, I'm having trouble. Oh.
Hiding under like the ivy or something in the middle.
They might be. Like there's the conduit there and there's three things mounted. Yeah, we'll keep going and I'll see if we spot them. But yeah, there's the uplights mounted to the side too that uplight the trees. This is where I wish it wasn't daylight savings time. I don't know about that bill, what it is, preserve daylight forever.
Yep.
Sunlight Protection Act. Oh. Lighting design is going to, well actually, lighting design won't suffer.
What? No.
Utilities will suffer.
Why? Oh, 'cause
We'll use less, but there's still going to be time for lighting. It's just the amount of time will change.
oh, like they won't make as much money.
What's that?
You see the tracks right there? That
Yeah.
tree has grown over.
Oh yeah, that's true. The tree's right over them.
But it's technically more environmentally sustainable to pass that
Yes,
back,
I agree.
which is why they should do it.
Agreed.
Aside from my own personal selfishness.
I know. I want more sunlight too.
Like when you get to leave work, it's not good.
Yes, that part is really nice.
Okay, fine, I'll record it later.
Oh, like the day after. Oh no, that's it. Yeah.
Up ahead here is one of the few. They have a few frames periodically that let you see the city through. This is an illuminated frame. In the evening, this is a LED that rings it, so it's a glowing box that says, "Look here." And then they have hidden lights underneath the benches as well, so that you can step down. We can occupy that area. They'll be done with their photo in a minute. You want to go and see? Yeah. We'll let them take their picture, and then we'll take over.
You make them uncomfortable.
That's right. We'll stare at them and make hacking, coughing noises.
What we know about 13 people is enough to make anything.
That's true. So under here, there's light fixtures, and then down, not under the steps, but under here, there's a glow too. What do they do for the steps? They should have something, but I don't think they do. They should, not a handrail. These are perforated. Maybe there's a glow behind them. I'm trying to remember. Because this should be, oh, you know what? They don't need it because of this. This provides so much light that this is the step lighting at night. This becomes a very bright frame filling the space, and then you're kind of looking down. You can see all the way straight shot down the street to the other river. We could, or we could take it further down by Hudson Yards. Either way is good. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we could do it by the vessel. That might be dark. Yeah. Yeah, we're making our way up. Yeah, let's keep going. We'll take a picture further on, I think, if we want to. So these were not planned exits. These exits were not originally planned in the Highline, which is why when you look at the solutions they chose, like the adjustable floodlights with shrouds, those weren't L'Observatoire's choice. Those were added on as more access points were needed.
Examples of when they started putting taxes on the amount of windows.
And the amount of window
It was like a suddenly
could be, but more likely, there's a rule in New York City in terms of you can't have a window if you're within 12 feet of another structure, in terms of fire prevention and passing between things, unless it's a fire-rated window. So I think these have been bricked up a long time before the Highline was there. My guess is because this was a train carrying potentially flammable products, maybe they were forced to brick up at the time. Because now we see a lot of stuff that's not bricked up, right? It's not all this way, but the brick that we see tends to be on older buildings. So it was probably enforced by the railroad. Yeah.
That's just a stairwell.
Yes, yeah. Yep, there's the Zaha building. Lovely. We'll stop and look at that. Everyone can say, ah. Did you say one day I want to live there? Yeah. This is where the 20-year reunion will be, when you're all rich, famous lighting designers, architects, engineers, and everything. We're all going to party on Zaha patio. And I think, look at the effort put to connect with the Highline. This is one of the buildings that tried the hardest to get that permission. Same plantings, same level, similar light approaches. Their goal was, okay, we feel like the Highline, please connect us to the Highline. We should be part of the Highline. Well, after the start of the Highline, yes, yeah. Highline predates the Zaha Hadid building. I think the first section of it opened up in 2000. Construction started in 2005. I think the first section opened up in 2009. Second in 2011. Oh, yeah, a lot of these buildings have only been here 10 years. That's true. Yes. Not empty. It was a lot of factories, like the brick ones that we've seen there. That, like the 5-floor New York City apartment with the cat. There was a lot of that here. So the Highline has brought a lot more wealth to the area. We see all these
Yeah.
big buildings drawn here by the prestige of this park, I would say. And you know, this has been an art district for at least 25 years. So Chelsea has a lot of art galleries, things like that as well that help draw people. But the Highline, I think, made the biggest difference in saying, hey, it put this area on the map. Otherwise, most of the art galleries were here, but the heart of Chelsea was generally a few blocks that way. Yeah. So now we're approaching Hudson Yards up ahead. We'll see the other sections of the Highline and then go into Hudson Yards. Oh, and we're doing great on time. It's only 6 something.
August 2009, I feel like the Highline just opened.
Yes, I think you're right.
It was like a big
Yes. You're absolutely right. It was right in that time when it opened to the public.
2010-ish or when?
I remember going to a fundraiser that
Yeah.
I was at a urinal next to David Bowie, and like, oh my God, it's David Bowie. He was one of the more famous proponents of the Friends of the Highline, pushing for it. But yeah, 2009, opened to the public, the first section. Second section was 2011,
And then up here's
and that took a lot longer.
like this has been what, like 4 years?
This opened 3 years ago.
3 years?
Yeah, 3 years. I had to count it by classes. I'm like, this class, last class. 3 of my classes have been in this section.
I moved my office into my office 30th in February 2019.
Uh-huh.
And I could walk to the Highline then.
Yeah.
It's over here.
Nice.
I don't know that you could connect them.
That we connect Hudson Yards and the Highline?
Like I think the Highline, there was like it didn't. Maybe this wasn't open. I don't know.
There was a part that didn't open here, and they had food trucks underneath and some other stuff at the end.
It was closed at the end last time I was here though.
The part that connects to Javits is still closed off and undeveloped, although it's meant to be undeveloped. That they're wanting to leave it. At least that's what they're saying now, is they want to leave it with the kind of the stones and stuff. We'll walk out in that direction after we see the newest section is to the right up here.
Yeah,
Confusing
walk
because
out.
you like as a person who doesn't know, you're like trying to get onto it.
from places that aren't open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then in the pandemic, it was all
One of our last pole lights here for another entrance. Oh, well, yeah, let's see. We'll let the others go. Oh, we're good. Okay. And now we're really transitioning to notice the change in materials and orientation. This is transitioning. We're still on the Highline, but this is ramping up to be the level of Hudson Yards. Materials are very more like Hudson Yards.
Are a lot of the developers here like old U.S. money or foreign developers, or what's the deal?
That's a good question. Let's go this way first.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's okay. I don't remember the developers for the Hudson Yards. I might have in the presentation, but I'll have to look it up. I think they bought up a lot of this land. So underneath Hudson Yards is the train rail. It's the repair yard for for Long Island Railroad. That's the one. I was trying to remember which rail. And then so they built this over it, essentially. They had to fight for air rights. And it is a for-profit enterprise. They're trying to make money on it. I think they're struggling. Oh yeah, you like that? So this is the most recent section here. A lot of artwork that changes more frequently. So we're getting to the plaza at the end has artwork that changes every season. We might have the new stuff in there. Getting cold now. We'll spend a good portion of Hudson Yards inside, so don't worry, we won't be too freezing. But yeah, you'll see artwork periodically mixed in, like our friend the horse over there.
Top sexy unicorn.
So sexy. I'm surprised they still haven't focused here. Along here had been a series of artwork for proposals for what was going to go there next, and you could actually vote on what you wanted to see. Not here now. I don't know what happened. That's the current piece of artwork. Yeah, the bust of the woman. Yeah. So here they're taking advantage of new technology, right? L'Observatoire ditched the larger spotlights, and instead they have got these narrow cylinders. These have a built-in shroud so that you don't see the glare from the different angles. Same output. In fact, it's brighter because it's newer. Why do you guys think they chose to have lights that stick up above the ground instead of in-grade lights? Snow. Plants too. As the plants grow, as the snow grows, they didn't want to have to trim down or clean off the lights. I remember getting complaints from a company that installed their in-grade LED lights in Buffalo, New York, and it snowed and the lights weren't hot enough to melt the snow anymore. The metal halide they replaced would have melted everything away, but the LED couldn't do it. So you always have to think with LED, when you're doing landscape lighting, how's this landscape going to change season by season? How high is the snow going to get? How much is it? What's the intention? When you're specifying lights to light up a tree, do you think about how tall this tree is now, or do you think about the tree cover in 10 years with your light? In this case, the light's only going to last about 10 years, so that's usually a good way to do it. So sometimes looking for adjustable optics, dimmability, these are all key features. Let's keep going. We'll see some more.
Here they have used pole.
Yeah, and here they are using poles, right? You're seeing more poles to light the plants higher up and to light the wall. So they've changed the language here, right? This is not original Highline. This is added in, or parts of it. Some of this remained original, I think, but other parts were added. So notice in this plaza, if you look across at the edge, you can see the LEDs.
That's the installation error?
No, it's an installation error. It's tipped up a little bit to get more. Actually, I shouldn't say that. It's not that it's fully an installation error. To get more light in the plaza, they tipped it up too. And we're viewing it from a much further distance than we would normally be, right? When the Highline's only 20 feet wide for most of the Highline, so you don't have that kind of visibility. Here we can get further away so you can see underneath it more easily too. But both are the case. And they rely a lot on, the plaza is primarily lit by the light fixtures up at the top. How many of you at Leducation saw magnet-mounted lights?
Yeah.
Definitely a trend right now, right? Let's mount our lights with magnets. Sure enough, if we go to the park here, do you want a souvenir?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yep, it's magnet mounted. Here's the problem. Does anyone know what happens to magnets in sub-zero temperatures?
Fall down.
They don't have the same magnetism, right? There's a degradation. All of these fell down the first year that they were installed because L'Observatoire, experts in lighting, Magnets, not so much. I know. I pointed that out to them, or I asked them about it while they were giving a large architectural tour this last year in October, because I was their host for IES. And there was a stumbling moment there where they're like, yeah, it was a learning moment. So they've replaced these with stronger magnets. Why were magnets a good idea? Theoretically. Installation and replacement, exactly that. They were having a nightmare of a time. Some of the LED is now more than 10 years old. The LED itself has faded enough they need to replace it. And while they did place those drivers for easy access along the Highline, the LEDs themselves had degraded enough that they need to pull it out and replace it. It was proving to be a high cost project for the contractors, and it would damage some of the plants as they got through there. So they said, let's solve that this time. Make it easier to take it out and put it in. So magnets, there you go. Easy to pull it out, easier to access it.
And
But
magnets are like kind of concealed like here. Does it affect them as well, like the cold and the snow, as you say? Like maybe not as much?
here it might not have affected it as much as if it was out in the open, but it really has to do with the temperature of the magnet. This would protect it from the humidity maybe. The other thing is, as snow falls, maybe it melts, and right, snow is, water is one of the few things that when it solidifies, it takes up more volume, right? So liquid water, water could melt, refreeze, and start to push itself up in there too. But ultimately, it was the temperature that that reduced what the magnets could handle, and all of the stuff fell down.
So you can take it out?
Yeah.
So like...
Oh, you.
Oh, it's all fallen down. Right?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there's one over there. Maybe we'll fix it for although I don't want to bother the lady. Yeah, you can see one that's on the ground over there.
Or you could take a picture and send it to your friends at...
I could send it to my friend at L'Observatoire and say,
I'm sure they'll want to hear that thing to mess it up again.
yes. All right, let's talk Hudson Yards. So, this was originally built over 30 Long Island Railroad tracks, which feed into Penn Station. These are the repair yards. These are where they store trains. This is still underneath Hudson Yards. And it's owned by, there we go, Related Companies, Oxford Properties Group. It's the largest private real estate development in the U.S. history. It's very, very large in terms of dollar value. Not square footage, but dollar value. A couple iconic buildings that we'll see. 10 Hudson Yards. KPF was the architect, L'Observatoire. 30 Hudson Yards, KPF was the architect, L'Observatoire. And 35 Hudson Yards, David Childs, SOM was the architect, L'Observatoire. So we will start to see as it gets dimmer, a consistency between these buildings in terms of the lighting. If you're a lighting designer on 3 projects with 3 architects that look different, what are some of the things you have control over to make them unified? The lighting. What about the lighting can you control? Color temperature is the first. All of these have a consistent color temperature between them. Very intentional, trying to connect them visually. That's probably the biggest connection they have. We'll see other details along they'll use lines of light pretty frequently. Each of these has a lot of glass, a lot of verticals, so they'll tend to accentuate those. This is the shed. The shed's a performance space. Diller, Sgraffito, and Renfro did this. The same people who did the renovation at Lincoln Center. Tillotson Design worked with them on this, right? Tillotson Design has that long relationship with them. Part of what makes the shed is lit very differently. First, it's a different color temperature. Boo, Suzanne Tillotson. Why couldn't you have matched? But, or boo, Herve Corte, depending on what color you like. Very different approach. There's a diffuse shroud that goes over this, and the light is pushed through it. This whole assembly can move to cover or uncover sections of the shed. The building features a 120-foot telescopic shell at Hudson Yards. It can extend out from the base building when needed for larger performances. And it's clad in tetrafluorothene, so it's like large pillows. So it's not as heavy as you'd think, but very strong. And it takes light beautifully. It has kind of an ethereal glowing look. Very different from the rest of the structures there. Lastly, the vessel. Heatherwick was the architect. L'Observatoire did the lighting. Very challenging to light this. When we get close, we'll talk about why. what they had to do. And then the shops and restaurants at Hudson Yards, this was Elkis Manfredi as the architect. Large-scale luxury building, or luxury shopping center. A lot of it is actually closing or has closed. I think Neiman Marcus isn't open anymore. I have to update this. That's Hudson Yards. So we're going to walk in and check them out in person. Ugh. Okay. What's that?
I was saying my office was 2 blocks that way. She's like, it's a nice area. I was like, 30th and 8th?
Oh, yeah, no. It's here.
Not a bad area.
It's nice and it is in Manhattan. That's true. That's the area that just sees that Penn Station where all the buses and all go in. I wonder if Moynihan Station opening is going to change that over time. It is, and that might start driving up the prices of lofts and stuff. But maybe it'll bring in kind of upscale restaurants, have a similar effect the Highline had here. I don't know though. Penn Station persists.
They just redid Pennsy, right? Or they're planning for that whole entrance at 7th Avenue is being redone with like the big glass,
Oh, that's right. Yes.
big fancy entrance now, or going to, but whatever. 110 has been under construction.
That's true.
But I'm done with that.
Oh, here, let's grab this for a second. So, let's take advantage of the fact that we have this lumber here to look at the distribution of light coming out of the Highline. Since we still don't see the overall effect, you can kind of see it a little bit, but see how close to vertical this is coming out, or how close to horizontal? That's what it's really meant to rake all the way across to the other side of the 28-foot span over this section. Yep, that's part of why it won Illumination Awards, was the detailing for, even though there are only maybe 4 elements that we could count in the Highline, the use of those elements to highlight the park without any internal lighting, without any poles interrupting, was very successful. Especially given New York City's requirements for having at least half a foot candle everywhere in the park.
My friend at Kia was a dresser on it, so
Ah.
thinking about the show.
Yeah. So, while there is another section of Highline that goes that way, it's going to be very cold. I think we can go this way.
Let's do it. Yeah, but at least more barbecue.
Yeah.
No, where are we going for dinner?
We're going to this. Did you go? We're going to the same rooftop bar we went to in the fall. That's where I can find reservations for 14.
How far is it?
It is 43rd and 8th, so we're gonna walk in. We're walking a few avenues over, or we could take the subway one stop. Yeah, we might take the subway. That'll give us a chance to see the new subway train at the Hudson Yards.
Oh, she's like, I like it.
I'm gonna go to Times Square for the rally.
Yeah.
They're having a piano anniversary of Piano Shade's rally.
Ah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. It is.
That's right.
New sparkles.
One of my friends is
Oh yeah, that's new.
she was
Wow.
harassed in some way this week.
Oh, it's a sparkle.
It is.
I think the lighting by lighted, right? I think it's just
It looks lighted to me. I think it's like Christmas lights on it. That's new.
Closer.
That's true. We can. I was going to talk about the shed first and take us in order, but
Ask Vanessa if she knows what they are.
that's true.
She works in the office there. She's like a customer service.
Yeah. I wonder if they're festive for a particular celebration or something. They're not normally a part of it.
No.
Or maybe they decided the pine cone really needs some Christmas lights. I'm not sure. I sound so stuffy. Yes, that's true too. So first off, we have the, that's kind of loud. Let's step this way. That'll block the sound. Okay, a little bit quieter over here. Welcome to Hudson Yards. Now, if you see in the distance by the water, the Highline does continue. It wraps around Hudson Yards and goes to the Javits Center. That part of the Highline is just gravel. And it's really cold right now, so I thought I'd spare you the walk. But I wonder if they'll develop it more. The Highline has said they're not developing that part more. That part is meant to be partly because of the proximity to the water and keeping the plants alive, and partly just their intention. They're not developing that to be anything more than it is. Here we have the shed, the Dillers Graffiti and Renfro project. Tillotson doing the design. As mentioned, this whole shed can, this part can shift. The cover over can retract or move forward to change the amount of space. Takes about an hour. It moves super slow, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, these are the wheels that, you know, if we push really hard, we can move it. No.
I don't think so.
So what? This whole thing moves?
Yes. So this whole thing that's on the wheels between these three and the three on the other side is a membrane that can shift further that way. So it can tuck further into the space there. I think they've left it in this position for quite a while now.
Why would they move it? Like, what is the reason?
Why? To change the size of the space. So if they wanted a bigger concert hall, they could keep it this way. If they want more plaza space in front to do some other stuff here, then they can retract it and do smaller concerts there, something outside here. I'm actually surprised that, well, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm curious to know if during the pandemic they were holding a lot of concerts inside and so kept it big so that they had more air circulation. Otherwise, I would have said make it small so there's more space outside to frolic without worrying about COVID.
What are only this thing moves, right? Or
Right,
this thing?
only this. So this stays put.
Okay.
This is the inner portion here. This tracks back. Does this fold?
What is it?
I'm seeing if this folds. This part tracks back. I don't think this part changes.
And like, how would it increase or decrease the space? Like you were saying, increase the space for the concert. Like how?
Maybe it folds on itself. I am trying to remember. Do these fold in? I'll have to look at the video of it folding. Because you're right. These look like they would stay where they are. It may just open up the top of it. So I'll double check. Then we have the vessel in the middle is probably the most iconic of Hudson Yards. That's the object people know.
What's it for?
Walking.
That's what I thought. Okay.
It's a
Yeah,
glorified
that's what I thought.
staircase. Also upsettingly frequently used for suicides, and so they started looking for solutions to prevent that. And right now you can't go up it because of that.
Oh, people are going up right now.
Oh, maybe they've reopened. Maybe they decided that Christmas lights make it happier.
Maybe they don't. Maybe you're only allowed to go up a certain amount of flights.
Yeah. Yeah, for a while they were closed after it. I wonder what's
Something
changed.
happened there?
Let's walk close. Yes.
Yeah.
Some people would climb to the top and then jump down into the middle. Yeah.
Now they just have to find another place.
Let's go closer though and look at the lighting challenges, because this is a very complex thing to light.
Are you going to go up?
No. Yes. There is blue light accents in there that they picked. Kind of purplish blue.
And like you're like asking him that question. So nowadays people are talking about blue light.
Right. Well, large amounts of blue light. It's about dosing and about what color. There's very specific nanometers that are bad. These are not great, but it's at a low level, so it's more of an accent. Seeing it, yeah. That's true.
But like only if you look down.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Let's talk about that. Yeah, make that comment for the group, Rick. It's a good one.
Yeah, this reminds me of Chicago. Like they have a beam. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is similar between the two of them? You're absolutely right. Super reflective, right? This is specular. It is a mirrored surface. How do you light a mirrored surface becomes a very big challenge. How is it illuminated now? How do we see this form?
It is illuminated by the surrounding lights.
Right? We're catching up. We're seeing the ground reflected in some of it. We're seeing the glass reflecting the buildings over there. There are lower level. As we go around, you'll see there's lights integrated in the staircase, and there are some select uplights. But generally, you're not lighting the underside because it's so shiny. You want to get kind of an ambient light that's going to pick up the shininess, but you don't want to cast light on it because it's just going to project it towards the shopping center. Here you can see the middle, they've populated with a deep indigo light, right? So they've got a big uplight. That is helping to pick up details. I like that echo too. I can hear myself so much better right now, and how stuffy I am. So you can see the.
You can go in, he said, if you want to walk through.
Oh, we can go in? That would be wonderful. Thank you. This is the first time in 3 years it's been open to walk through.
I think we can go up.
Yeah, but going through is great. Give us a sense for the inside. We could take a group picture. Yeah, well, I'm sure it's got to be a stressful place to work.
Welcome to the vessel, folks.
Thank you.
At the moment, we only allow guests to be here at the base. Then taking pictures, exit straight ahead.
Thank you very much. So the inside there's illuminated rails inside of, like these are captured. Can we see them? Out of these ones. Further up, they have a detail where we're picking up the. Yeah.
They have it.
Quick question: Why would they use a color that is the worst for phones ever? Like that is the worst LED color.
That's true.
Like the worst.
It is true. It is like the blue screen of death.
That blue,
Yep.
is like no one can. Like,
It's terrible. We were talking about it's bad for human health too. It's bad for circadian entrainment and nightlife.
But I think
Yep.
they changed something over here because before I think they were much brighter.
They may be dimmed down now because it's still daytime maybe, or because they know people are just walking through and they don't need it to project up. But notice up there, our experience of the vessel is really reflections of this blue donut in the middle, right? You see that blue picked out at each of those curved surfaces. And then you're also getting inner reflections of both sides. So very challenging for l'Observatoire to light. The other challenge was as you go up the staircases, having enough light beneath you. If there was something elevated above the handrails, you'd be seeing it from down here, and it would be glary or distracting. So there's a lot of integrated handrail light that we could see. Oh, further up. Where do we see it? You can get a little sense of how it's glowing down onto the handrail over there, but it's hard to tell with the, yeah. Yeah, so very difficult to light. The elevator is very cool, right? It's almost more of a funicular than an elevator. Like it goes up at a slope to get you to the top.
But you can't come off of it. So people who are disabled can't access the vessel. So it literally is all it is that. So
Ah.
my disabled friends boycott this space because it doesn't actually have accessible space. You can't walk off of it.
Have they changed? Yeah, that sucks. I wonder if they'll change it or
They
not.
change it with everything they're doing, but that was something that's been for years now.
Yeah.
The disability community, they hate this thing because it's not actually accessible. It's
Yeah.
Like it puts you in a little thing and then you get to do this little ride. And you can't actually get out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, you cannot get out of and top? Oh.
It like takes you up to a viewing window.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope like, they like run around.
Yeah, when you want, right? You could clean or something.
All right. Seen enough vessel for a day? You want to? Yeah. Let's get out of this here. Flee the vessel. We could take a picture if we want, or we could take a picture. Yeah, I think outside will be less confusing. Thank you.
That said 2.5 feet, and I was like, this
All
is
right.
4 feet. Like, this is different.
Yeah, here. Lights are on.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Rickinson. So here, he found a good example. Here we see some of the illuminated handrails that exist going up the vessel as well. So it didn't exist on that other side, but that's what they're using to provide kind of ambient illumination, similar in a little bit to the Highline. If they don't want to interrupt your view looking out across the skyline. All right.
I think they have updated this before there was other kind of, now it's
I'm trying to remember if they've updated it or not to something different. I don't think.
because these are not original. You can see.
That's true. This was added in, right?
Yeah, you can see it down like it's not original.
Yeah. They must have taken out something that didn't work well and put it in instead. Either that, or maybe this was glass enclosed and they realized it couldn't be. The upper ones are all glass. I wonder if the original detail had glass for here too, but probably not. Probably different thing.
It's kind of the glazer that we saw on the other side.
Different, but it's controlling the beam to not project into the space, just down.
But same kind of.
Yeah. All right. Well, 6:45. We can warm up in the mall. Actually, I think we've seen malls. I think we're going to go towards the transit hub and go get dinner, drink stuff. So, because it's pretty cold. So, yeah, other things to note on Hudson Yards. Again, we've got pole lights along the perimeters, relatively high, trying to conceal those with trees, working closely with the landscape architect. So those are aiming to provide light to the plaza without the light fixtures standing out. Especially in the fall when there's leaves on the trees, those lights are largely concealed. And then they've done the same thing, weaving poles in among these trees. 10 years from now, these trees will have grown enough that the poles are underneath the main canopy. So that's some of the design coordination. When you work on landscape lighting, this is really our major landscape lighting discussion. You always think about how high a thing's going to grow and what are the beam spreads I'm going to need to cover it over time. Yeah.